Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's going to help us with something that is fundamental to our success. David Hiatt was born and raised in the suburbs of Dayton, Ohio, and being a native Ohioan, it was only natural for him to get his communications degree from The Ohio State University. The next step was to get married and have 2 sons. When the marriage ended, David went to United Theological Seminary, earning a master's degree in communications. David comes from an interesting family. Mom and dad divorced when he was 5 years of age. The interesting part is that dad raised him while marrying and divorcing 3 more times before David graduated from college. Mom moved south and married twice more. This dynamic made for many siblings in the process. With this family dynamic, David learned early how to adapt and deal with other people. This naturally led him to pursue his education in communication and a minor in psychology. Getting along with and communicating with a wide range of people was natural for him. David's first job was in sales, where he sold life insurance, then moving on to general insurance and eventually selling radio advertising. It was at that point when he got into training other people in sales and communications. This became a skill set, and he was very good at it and getting people to grow and develop. For the past 25 years, he has made it his mission to help as many people as possible to communicate in more effective ways in sales, business, and their personal lives. David is the International Training Director for Global Accounts at Sandler Training and author of From the Boardroom to the Living Room, Communicate with Skill for Positive Outcomes, where he captures the essence of powerful communication tactics he trains business leaders to deploy in sales and negotiation settings. David has lived in Las Vegas for the past 15 years. He and his wife will be celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary this September. David Hiatt, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am ready, Jim, when you are.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Well, I think my current passion has stayed pretty steady over the last 25 years, and it is basically to help people communicate more effectively. Because I have found that most of our issues, most of our problems stem from a lack of communication, which means a lack of understanding, a lack of clarity of what the other person's message means or doesn't mean. So that passion is still alive and still on fire for me.
Well, and even going through the book, I started really getting the sense that it's almost like learning music to me. And I'm not a musician, but to me, it's like, okay, if I want it to sound good, I need to know these certain elements in order to be able to put it all together to make something that is pleasing.
That is absolutely a good analogy. And I also miss the music gene in my family. Everyone else has it. And I think I caught that communication bug, and that the idea that just because we say it, they don't necessarily hear what we thought we said. And I learned that very early with the multiple situations I found myself in with the different dynamics that were constantly going on. So by accident, I really needed to make sure I understood what the direction was so that I could then make sure I accomplished whatever they were asking me to do or whatever I needed to be done. So I didn't know what that really was till I got into the communication field and realized it was just basically clarifying the message the other person is sending.
Well, and also the whole psychology component, when you overlay that, to me, I think that's just a powerful combination. So even for me, when I have had the opportunity to have a good sales experience, I'm not even thinking about customer service, but even a good sales experience, oftentimes I'll ask folks, what was their major? What were their experiences? And I especially like to do it to young folks. And I have found a really odd number of folks that say, oh, well, I majored in business and minored in psychology.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was really by accident that I got the minor in psychology. It's simply because I took one of those courses and liked it. I thought it was very fascinating and interesting. And it's amazing how it has served me over the years. It reminds me of taking typing class in high school. Little did I know how that skill set would come in the future with all of our computerization and things. And it's really the same thing with that communication model and things. It's amazing how that psychology has just, in so many ways, helped me understand, number one, me and what's going on in my head, but number two, to give people a break, to realize that from a psychological perspective, we're not all in the same places.
Well, and I can see by looking at the way that you've laid out the book how that those two things have manifest themselves. So like in chapter 1, you talk about, of course, the needs. So we have to identify, the importance and be able to talk about working towards progress. You talk about the skills, the art of mutual agreement, questions, and listening and talking, the attitude, emotional involvement, the outcomes, growing together, keep talking. And one part that I really like, to me, I want to find out why you made the appendix, but it's the art of de-escalation. So why was that in the appendix?
Well, that was interesting. I had finished the book without that. And as you know, the process of writing a book is if you're going to do it well, there's a team effort in it. And so once I pretty much had those outlined and had the content there, as we were talking with some of the other folks that were editing and looking at things, someone just happened to say, but how do you really de-escalate? Because there's a couple stories in there about some situations that could have escalated into some real conflict. But how do you really do it? And I think that last one was sort of one of just a question that just grew in to that appendix. You know what? I sort of shared that with you because can you put that on the paper and let's add that in? And I think there was a story that was involved in that appendix of how to de-escalate. And the person involved in it said, well, you know what? As soon as people read that, they'll know who I am. I said, the odds of them reading the book are slim to none, dear. So don't worry about it.
That's a good point. Okay, so there's also some really interesting points for me that kind of just were, you can call them ahas or epiphanies, whatever. But the one part is you talked about the acknowledging of the opinion of others. And you talk about acknowledging the opinion of others. It doesn't have to do anything with the fact that you agree with them, because we all have opinions based on what we believe to be true. And that opinions, it's not a right or wrong, they're just that. And opinions are formed when information gets filtered through a person's belief systems and experiences. And I think that's really key to remember. I mean, we don't have the same experiences. And so when people are engaged in conversation, that's really the backstory that we're all kind of getting visualizations into.
And I think part of the yelling that goes on so much in today's, quote, communication world is the fact that people don't feel that they're being heard. Now, I'm not talking about the people that really aren't communicating well, that what they're saying is nothing, really, there's nothing there to be heard. It's just an emotional outburst. I'm talking about the sincere people that truly have an opinion, and it's thought out. It's based on their experiences. Because when we're all born, Jim, we do not have any beliefs. So everything that we are championing, that we're out there fighting for, has been something that we throughout our life have acquired as something that we hold near and dear. And I always urge people to do a belief inventory, right? How many of your beliefs are really yours based on your experience and what you know to be true versus coming from other folks? In other words, mom, dad, grandpa, the coach, and you pick that up and it morphed into something that, when you really think about it, isn't really helping you. But if you can allow people to acknowledge that belief and actually listen to it, don't argue with it, just acknowledge a belief. They feel heard, and that's going to give you a much better chance to have a dialogue with them about perhaps changing that belief, or at least being open-minded that what I'm trying to share could be an option or could be true.
I think that's a really important point. And you actually have in here a couple examples on things that people can do in order to help with that de-escalation, or maybe even cause a pause or a break. I mean, I remember when my wife and I will be celebrating our 25th anniversary this fall. And when we first had gotten married, I remember she would not allow me to leave a conversation that we were having that got heated. And I'm like, look, if you don't let me step away, we're really going to have some fireworks. I grew up with 3 brothers just outside of Chicago on the south side. I said, if you want to go toe to toe, I can do that, and I'll rip you apart. I mean, not meaning that I want to do that. It's just that I can, because that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah. Was there any de-escalation tactic in there that jumped out at you as you were looking through it?
Well, I like that you have several things that are examples when you start talking about the heat of the moment, and like you have several things that could be said. Like one here is that I really think I need a little bit of time to process what you've said. If it's all right with you, I'm just going to take a break, and I will re-engage with you tomorrow in the morning so that we can work this out. So you give kind of a framework and understanding to talk about. First of all, you need to recognize the emotional component, but then you also need to have some type of commitment on when you're going to come back and convene. So if you're setting an expectation.
I'm not just walking away, Jim, and saying the heck with it. I'm saying right now I am not. And again, for my poor wife, as my dedication to the book, she's put up with all this. And I remember when we were first together, and something had happened, and there was a conflict, and she just came at me with loud, emotional. I remember just sitting there going, I don't do this. If this is the kind of relationship you're expecting, then I'm not the guy you want to continue dating, right? Because that's just not going to accomplish anything. So we sort of set that up early. Now, it doesn't mean we never had any conflicts or we never had any arguments, right? But a good example was just a couple weeks ago, she said to me, we need to have a conversation about this. And I was not in the frame of mind to have that conversation. And because it was an emotion, there was going to be emotions attached to it. And I just simply said, you know what? I'm just not at a place where that conversation makes sense right now. Can we put it off? Till I was going on a trip, till I get back from the trip. Now, of course, when you get back from the trip, guess what's happened? It's not near the issue that it was at the moment when she was upset about it. So now what happens is the conversation either doesn't even happen because it's no longer needed, or it's a much gentler conversation, and any conflict that would have come from it is gone.
Well, I think, but you've also established the agreement that, if you say that she needs to respect that. And so that's eventually where my wife and I got to. It's like, look, you've got to give me the opportunity to step away. So there was a study that I was reading, because one of the things that you didn't cover here, and it'd be interesting to know if there's some, research that's been done in this, talking about how emotions affect IQ, because the emotional centers of your brain are going to hijack your IQ. And so therefore, how many times have we all gotten into heated conversations, and later on you're like, gosh, I forgot to say this. And it's because that happens in your brain.
Oh, it happens all the time. And I know at some point you're probably going to ask me the question, what kind of book would I recommend? So, since you've asked the question, there's a great book by a guy named Daniel Kahneman, and it's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's a bit of a tough read, but it really answers your question about what part of the brain, and I allude to it briefly in the book, in that one example of thinking fast and slow, where when you think fast, that's usually your amygdala, or however you pronounce it. People pronounce it differently. It's that fight or flight stuff, emotions go, as opposed to your slower thinking, pre-cortex brain that allows you to think things through better, make better decisions and better choices. And that book is an awesome book, and it cites all kinds of research on exactly what you're talking about.
Well, in addition to that, there's also an age thing associated that in regards to that prefrontal cortex and when it actually gets developed, and it's not until our 20s and stuff. So when you're having those arguments with those teenagers, you're like, I don't even know how you could be thinking that. It's because it hasn't been developed yet.
Their brain's not wired to do anything else.
Exactly. Yep. Okay, so there's another part, and I think you kind of touched on this a moment ago, but to me, I see that this particular tool could be valuable in a lot of different ways, and it's called the interpersonal relationship developer.
Okay.
I mean, to me, one of the things I think we fail to realize is that when we've worked with somebody for quite a while, it's really almost like being that family member. And we can essentially relax, get too relaxed with certain things, but not, go to the point to where we are creating a deeper connection and bond with them. So it's kind of like we're part way there. And so it create, to me, it's a lot of vulnerability that could take place with that. But this interpersonal relationship developer, I think, would be an awesome, joint tool to work with somebody on to create it. For me, I'd like to take this with my wife.
Well, we actually put that in there to do some things. But as we did it, I gave that circle example of each of us being our own individual circles, and how as you build that relationship, it's not the extinguishing of one of the circles. That does not create a relationship. It's the growing of each individual. And as you overlap in your relationship, as long as you're both growing, the relationship is growing. The problem becomes when one person grows, the other person necessarily doesn't, and considers their whole being as part of the other person's, or the other person continues to grow, and that common relationship overlap gets smaller and smaller, in which now it makes the communication more difficult, it makes the understanding more difficult, because you're no longer sharing that the common things. When you come back and you each share the day, and that overlap grows. When one person just waits for the other person because that's their everything, relationships have a real tough time growing. That's
a good point. So what we're talking about here, both in the boardroom and in the living room, is just riddled with emotion and passion. And one of the things that we look towards on the show to help us focus that in the right direction are quotes. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Well, yeah, there is, and I'm going to attribute it to a minister that I knew way back in my 20s. And she looked at me, and she was just as sincere as could be. And she just said, "David, now that you know better, act like it." Right? Because knowing better is not necessarily doing better. And so that quote has just stuck with me for years and years and years as I learn things and I find myself falling short. Right? Because, I've written this book. The only reason I could write the book because I messed it up most of the time, right? As I went through it. So, now that I know better, act like it.
I like that.
That's a huge one for me.
That's a really good quote. I like that. I'm going to have to borrow that one myself. So I know when you started talking about that, talking about the family upbringing, talking about, teaching other people, I find that one of the things is that one of the reasons why I became certified in emotional intelligence is to, be better at some of the things that you're writing about in this book. And because I find that going back and having reflection upon my own life, it's like, well, this is where I struggled. So I think a lot of times where we struggle is oftentimes where we want to, first of all, have ourselves get better at that. And then also we want others to not feel the same pain, and we have to help them. But, we have to go through humps in order to figure those things out. And I'm sure there are several that you've been over that you could probably share, but is there one that kind of stands out to you that'll help us?
Well, there's so many as you go through your life. And I think there was a point where you have to decide what you're going to do when you grow up. Okay. And I didn't really get to that point really until my late 30s, because I did a lot of different jobs, a lot of different sales jobs, a lot of different things. That's where I really got into the training and doing the different things. And I think the real hump for me was when some friends convinced me to enter this speaking contest, this speech contest. "Oh, Dave, you're a good speaker. You ought to do that thing." And I sort of did it halfway, because my buddies wanted me to. But when I got into it, I thought, at what point am I going to take myself seriously and really grow up and do something of excellence? And so I thought, you know what? I am just this is going to be my touchstone. I'm going to do this and see what really happens. And it was tough because that's the first time I really sat down and planned out what I was going to do, where I really sat down and practiced it beyond just the normal, yeah, I got it. I'm just going to wing it, right? Where I really had to sit down and take a skill assessment. Can I really do this? How am I going to do this? And actually go through, complete it, and do it. And it was an arduous kind of process because once you won at the local, you had to go to the regional or to the state, to the national. And I ended up winning the national competition, and as many years ago. But that the hump of taking it seriously, I got to grow up. I've got to get serious about what I'm doing. Now, I was a late bloomer in that, right? Now that happened early. It still didn't really affect me until I decided to grow up, which was about 10 years later, right? And I thought, what am I really good at? Well, I'm really good at affecting people, to deliver a message that can help them do better in their life, to feel better in their life. And that's when I got real serious. So for the last 25 years, it has been my passion. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, to me, I can find myself in that story quite a bit as well, talking about that, taking a while to figure things out and where you need to focus and, making it, some commitment, having some strategy around it and being able to execute tactically. And, I always say that one of the quotes that I like is that the Lord didn't give us youth and wisdom at the same time. So we have to go through several of these humps in order to kind of figure these things out. So that's why we like sharing them on the show, and thanks for doing that.
Yep.
So when you start talking about where you are right now, and I know you at one time you had your own Sandler franchise, and now you're moving and you're working with Global, and you're trying to, of course, help others, with this. You have the book. But when you start thinking about all these goals that you have, what's one of them?
Well, one of them is to touch as many people, not just business people, but as many people as I possibly can in a positive way. And again, positive outcomes and communication is probably the one way. Right? Because if you can get your communication skills down, if you can get more positive outcomes, even if it means getting a no, you're not the one for me, or no, you're not the product for me, that's still a win. So it's still a positive outcome. So if we can get to the positive outcomes quicker in our relationships, then my belief is people end up doing better.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. Need a powerful and entertaining way to ignite your next conference, retreat, or team building session? My keynotes don't include magic, but they do have the power to help your attendees take a leap forward by putting emotional intelligence into their employee engagement, and customer-centric leadership practices. So bring the infotainment creativity of the Fast Leader Show to your next event, and I'll help your attendees get over the hump now. Go to beyondmorale.com/speaking to learn more. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, David, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. David Hiatt, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Complacency. I'm living a pretty darn good life, doing what I love doing. And I've just had some conversations with some of my Sandler cohorts to look at some other directions that can motivate me. But I think what's really been an issue for the last probably 12 months is complacency.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Best leadership advice I ever received was from a football coach named Lou Holtz. He was speaking at an event, a luncheon event, and that's when I first heard that prior planning prevents poor performance. And I'm telling you, that has stuck with me my whole life. It's so true.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Letting other people help. Because you know what? We never do it alone. None of us get through this alone. And when we really can step back and allow other people to truly help us because they want to, right? I think that's huge.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Listening to understand rather than listening to respond.
What is one book? You actually mentioned that book. Let's mention it again.
I did. It was Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/David Hiatt, and that's Hiatt. And of course, we'll put a link to From the Boardroom to the Living Room on his show notes page as well. Okay, David, this is my last Hump Day Hold-On question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Well, I've got it narrowed down to two. First one would be listen to clarify. The second one would be behave my way to success. And they might be related, but I think I'm going to go with behave my way to success. Figuring out what I really needed to do. And it goes part of that planning. All those things all fit together, as you know. They're not in a vacuum. But I think early, especially in my 20s, as I was dabbling in different things and different careers and doing things, I think just doing more of the right behavior in the right amounts at the right time and for the right reasons.
David, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Pretty simple. You can Hiatt, that's DHIATT, @Sandler.com. That's probably the easiest way.
David Hiatt, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.